let me take you away to another time, perhaps another place, a place of dark, dark nights, filled with mysterious noises, glinting lights, and an unseen presence. There are no phones, no street lights, and if you find yourself confronted by something within that darkness, you have only your wits, or, if you're lucky, a friendly neighbour to help you. Join me for a quiet peek at true stories of fairy sightings and encounters in England, as collected by American author Evans-Wentz and published in 1911. Evans-Wentz sat down face to face with an array of ordinary English people and talked over a pot of tea or a glass of whiskey, at a kitchen table or on stones in a lush field of green grass, and he recorded their true stories of sightings and encounters with fairies. I hope you will enjoy them. Let's begin with one person's theory on the piskies of Cornwall. I imagine that 150 years ago, the belief in piskies and spirits was general. In my boyhood days, piskies were often called the mites or the little people. The word piskies is the old Cornish brogue for pixies. In certain grass fields, mushrooms growing in a circle might be seen of a morning, and the old folks, pointing to the mushrooms, would say to the children, "Oh, the piskies have been dancing there last night." People would go out at night and lose their way, and then declare that they had been pisky-led. I think they meant by this that they fell under some spiritual influence, that some spirit led them astray. The piskies were said to be small, and they were thought of as spirits. If we as children did anything wrong, the old folks would say to us, "The piskies will carry you away if you do that again." I always understood the piskies to be little people. A great deal was made about ghosts in this place. Whether or not piskies are the same as ghosts, I cannot tell, but I fancy that the old folks thought they were. A farmer who lived 2 miles from here, near the Gweek River, called Parson Jargo to his house for to have him quiet the ghosts or spirits that were regularly haunting it, for Parson Jargo could always put such things to rest. The clergyman went to this farmer's house and with his whip formed a circle on the floor, and then commanded the spirit, which made its appearance on the table, to come down into the circle. While on the table, the spirit had been visible to all the family, but as soon as it got into the ring, it disappeared, and the house was never haunted afterwards. A woman who lived near Brigg Church had a fine girl baby, but she thought the piskies had come and took it and put a withered child in its place. The withered child lived to be 20 years old and was no larger when it died than when the piskies brought it. It was fretful and peevish and frightfully shriveled. The parents believed that the piskies often used to come and look over a certain wall by the house to see the child, and I heard my grandmother say that the family once put the child out of doors at night to see if the piskies would take it back again. The piskies are said to be very small. You could never see them by day. I used to hear my grandmother, who has been dead 50 years now, say that the piskies used to hold a fair in the fields near Brig, and that people saw them dancing there. I also remember her saying that it was customary to set out food for the piskies at night. My grandmother's great belief was in piskies and in spirits, and she considered piskies to be spirits. She used to tell so many stories about spirits of the dead coming back and such things that I would be afraid to go to bed. William Murphy, who married my sister, once went to the Piskie house at Bossahan with a surveyor, and the two of them heard such unearthly noises in it that they came running home in great excitement, saying they had heard the piskies. And on a farm near here, a piskie used to come at night to thrash the farmer's corn. The farmer, in payment, once put down a new suit for him. But once the piskie came and saw it, he put it on and said, "Piskie fine and piskie gay, piskie now will fly away." And, they say, he never returned. Jimmy Thomas of Wendron Parish, who died within the last 25 years, was the last witch doctor I know in West Cornwall. He was supposed to have great power over evil spirits. His immediate predecessor was a woman called the Witch of Wendron, and she did a big business. My father once visited her in company with a friend whose father had lost some horses. This was about 70 to 80 years ago. The witch, when consulted on this occasion, turned her back to my father's companion and began talking to herself in Cornish. Then she gave him some herbs. His father used the herbs, and no more horses died. The herbs, you see, were supposed to have driven all evil spirits out of the stable. In this region, there are two kinds of pixies. One purely a land-dwelling pixie, and the other a pixie who dwells on the sea strand between high and low watermark. The land-dwelling pixie was usually thought to be full of mischievous fun, but it never did any harm. Now, there was a very prevalent belief when I was a boy that the sea strand pixie called Booker had to be given 3 fish to ensure that the fishermen got a good catch of fish themselves. Now, the land pixie was supposed to be able to render its devotees invisible if they only anointed their eyes with a certain green salve made of secret herbs gathered from Keris Moor. In the invisible condition thus induced, people were able to join the pixie revels, during which, according to the old tradition, time slipped away very, very rapidly, though people returned from the pixies no older than when they went with them. I used to hear about a Zeno girl who came to Newlyn as nurse to the child of a gentleman living at Zimmerman Cot. The gentleman warned her never to touch a box of ointment which he guarded in a special room, nor even to just enter that room. But one day, in his absence, she entered the room and took some of the ointment. Suspecting the qualities of the ointment, she put it on her eyes with the wish that she might see where her master was. She immediately found herself in the higher part of the orchard amongst the pixies, where they were having such junketing, meaning festivity and dancing, and there saw the gentleman whose child she had nursed. For a time she managed to evade him, but before the junketing was at an end, he discovered her and requested her to go home, and then, to her intense astonishment, she learned that she had been away 20 years, though she was unchanged. The gentleman scolded her for having touched the ointment, paid her wages in full, and sent her back to her people. It's said that she always had one regret, and that was that she hadn't gone into the forbidden room earlier. The fairy of the Newland Tolkien was in some ways like the Puck of the English Midlands, but this fairy or troll was described as a little, old, pleasant-faced man dressed in a tight-fitting leathern jerkin with a hood on his head, who lived invisible within the rocks. Whenever he chose to do so, he could make himself visible. Sometimes he was called the Wandering One. My old nurse, Betty Grankin, used to say that you could call up the troll at the Tolkien if, while there, you held in your hand 3 dried leaves, one of the ash, one of the oak, and one of the thorn, and pronounced an incantation or a charm. Betty would never tell me the words of the charm, because she said I was too much of a skeptic. The words of such a Cornish charm had to pass from one believer to another, through a woman to a man, and from a man to a woman, and thus alternately. Pixies were often supposed to be the souls of the prehistoric dwellers of this country. As such, pixies were supposed to be getting smaller and smaller until finally they are able to vanish entirely. The country pixies inhabiting the highlands from above Newlyn onto St. Just were considered a wicked sort. Their great ambition was to change their own offspring for human children, and the true child could only be got back by laying a 4-leaf clover on the changeling. A winicky child, one which was weak, frail and peevish, was of the nature of a changeling. Minor pixies, called knockers, would accept a portion of a miner's lunch on good faith, and by knocking led him to a rich mother-lode, or warn him by knocking if there was danger ahead or a cavern full of water. But if the miner begrudged them a crust of his lunch, he would be left to his own resources to find the lode. And, moreover, the knockers would do all they could to lead him away from a good lode. These mine pixies were supposed to be spirits, sometimes spirits of the miners of ancient times. In general appearance, fairies were much the same as pixies. They were small men and women, and much smaller than dwarfs. The men were swarthy in complexion, and the women had a clear complexion of a peach-like bloom. None ever appeared to be more than 25 to 30 years old. I have heard my nurse say that she could see scores of them whenever she picked a 4-leaf clover and put it in the wisp of straw which she carried on her head as a cushion for the bucket of milk. Her theory was that the richness of the milk was what attracted them. Pixies, like fairies, very much enjoyed milk, and people of miserly nature used to put salt around a cow to keep the pixies away, and then the pixies would lead such mean people astray the very first opportunity that came. According to some country people, the pixies have been seen in the daytime, but usually they are only seen at night. I should say that the modern belief in pixies and fairies arose from a very ancient Celtic or pre-Celtic belief in spirits. Just as among some savage tribes there is belief in gods and totems, here there was belief in little spirits, good and bad, who were able to help or to hinder man. Belief in the supernatural, in my opinion, is the root of it all. Here, amongst the fishermen and sailors, there is a belief that the dead in the sea will be heard calling if a drowning is about to occur. I know of a woman who went to a clergyman to have him exorcise her of the spirit of her dead sister, which she said appeared in the form of a bee. And I have heard of miners who believe that white moths are spirits. The old people thoroughly believed in the little folk, and that they gambolled all over the moors on moonlight nights. Some pixies would rain down blessings and others curses, and to remove the curses, people would go to the wells blessed by the saints. Whenever anything went wrong in the kitchen at night, the pixies were blamed, and after the 31st of October, or after Halloween, the blackberries were never fit to eat, for the pixies had been all over them. At the Manan Toll, there is supposed to be a guardian fairy who can make miraculous cures. And my mother knew of an actual case in which a changeling was put through the stone in order to get the real child back. It seems that evil fairies changed children, and that the fairy at the Manan Toll, being good, could, in opposition, undo their work. A spirit was put to rest right on the green here in Newlyn. The parson prayed and fasted, and then commanded the spirit to dip dry the sea with a limpet shell containing no bottom, and the spirit is supposed to be busy at this task to this day. Throughout all the west of Devonshire, anywhere around the moorlands, the country people are much given to belief in pixies and ghosts, and they are said to see them on the moors in the twilight hour. The piskies, thought of as little people who appear on moonlight nights, are still believed in here, and if interfered with too much, they are said to exhibit almost fiendish powers. In a certain sense, they are considered spiritual, but in another sense, they are much materialized in the conceptions of the people. I was up in bed and, I suppose, asleep, and I dreamt that the boy James came to my bedside and woke me up by saying, "How many lights does death put up?" And in the dream there appeared such light as I never saw in my life. And when I woke up, another light like it was in the room. Within 3 months afterwards, we buried 2 granddaughters out of this house. This was 4 years ago, and for 3 mornings, one after another, there was a robin at our cellar door before the deaths. Near St. Just, on Christmas Day, a piskey carried away in his cloak a boy, but the boy got home again. Then the piskey took him a second time, and again the boy got home. Each time he was taken, he was only away for an hour, and he seemed to be in a trance state. Up on Seaview Green there are 2 rings where the piskies used to dance and play music on a moonlight night. I've heard that they would come there from the moors. Little people, they are called. And if you keep quiet when they are dancing, you'll see them. But if you make any noise, they'll disappear. My grandmother, Nancy Madden, was down on Seaview Green by moonlight and saw the piskies dancing and passed right near them. She said they were like little children and wore red cloaks. Many say they have seen the small people here by the hundreds. In Ireland they call the small people the fairies. My mother believes there were such things, and so did the old folks in these parts. My grandmother used to put down a good furze fire for them on stormy nights because, as she said, they are a sort of people wandering around the world with no home or habitation, and they ought to be given a little comfort, she would say. The most fear of them was that they might come at night and change a baby for one that was no good. My mother said that Joan Nicholas believed the fairies had changed her baby because it was very small and cross-tempered. Up on the hill, you'll see a round ring with grass greener than anywhere else, and that is where the small people used to dance. I heard that a woman set out water for to wash her baby in, and that before she had used the water, the small people came and washed their babies in it. She didn't know about this, and so in washing her baby, got some of the water in her eyes, and then all at once she could see crowds of little people about her. One of them came to her and asked if she was able to see their crowd, and when she said yes, the little people wanted to take her eyes out, and she had to clear away from them as fast as she could. There are mine piskies which are not the knockers. I've heard old men in the mines say that they have seen them, and they call them the small people. It appears that they don't like company, for they are always seen singly. The knockers are spirits too, as one might say. They are said to bring bad luck, while the small people may bring good luck. A man named Bottrell, who lived near St. Teith, was pisky-led at West Down, and when he turned his pockets inside out, he heard the piskies going away laughing. Often, my grandmother used to say when I got home after dark, "You had better mind, or the piskies will carry you away." And I can remember still hearing the old people say that the piskies are the spirits of children who had passed. I have heard a good deal about the piskies, but I can't remember any of the old women's tales. I have heard, too, of people saying that they had seen the piskies. It was thought that when the piskies have misled you, they show themselves jumping about in front of you. They are a race of little people who live out in the fields. The piskies always come at night, and in marshy ground there are round places called pisky beds where they play. When I was little, my mother and grandmother would be sitting round the fire of an evening telling fireside stories. And I can remember hearing about a pisky of this part who stole a new coat, and how the family heard him talking to himself about it, and then finally say, "Pisky fine and pisky gay, pisky's got a bright new coat, pisky now will run away." And I can just remember one bit of another story. A pisky looked into a house and said, "All alone, fair maid? No, here am I with a dog and cat, and apples to eat and nuts to crack." In Tintagel, I used to sit round the fire at night and hear old women tell so much about piskies and ghosts that I was then afraid to go out of doors after darkness had fallen. They religiously believed in such things, and when I expressed my doubts, I was driven away as a rude boy. They thought if you went to a certain place at a certain hour of the night, that you could there see the piskies as little spirits. It was held that the piskies could lead you astray and play tricks on you, but that they never did you any serious injury. The pixies and fairies are little beings in the human form existing on the astral plane who may be in the process of evolution, and, as such, I believe that people have seen them. The astral plane is not known to us now because our psychic faculty of perception has faded out by non-use, and this condition has been brought about by an almost exclusive development of the physical brain. But it is likely that the psychic faculty will develop again in its turn. It is my point of view that there is a basis of truth in the folklore, with its remnants of occult learning, magic, charms, and the like. Folklore seems to be the remains of forgotten psychical facts rather than history, as it is often called. What do you think of that last theory there, explaining the existence of fairies? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. I love reading them. I hope this video has brought you some inspiration or comfort, or just a chance to relax in this busy world of ours. If you love my weekly videos, please consider joining me as a member of the channel. Just click on the join button below to get started. Your support would mean the world to me. Until next time, stay curious and be kind. Cheerio!